The alarm on my phone went off at 8 a.m., and like clockwork, I was up and moving. It wasn't the usual groggy shuffle to make coffee and scroll through the news. No, this morning, I had a mission. By 9 a.m., I knew the bombshell I was about to drop would detonate, and I wanted to savor every second of the fallout. I darted downstairs to set the kettle boiling, then back up again to grab a quick shower. The sound of water splattering the tiles barely registered as I ran through my mental checklist. Everything was in place, every last piece of my plan fine-tuned for maximum impact. Meanwhile, Kelly, my wife of almost 24 years, was still sound asleep. She deserved her rest, after all, though why she was so tired, I couldn't fathom. I'd done all the driving on our 500-mile round trip the day before, dropping our youngest daughter, Allison, off at college. Kelly had spent most of that drive snoozing in the passenger seat, a blanket tucked around her like royalty on a red-eye flight. For 2 decades, our marriage had been a front-row seat to the slow unraveling of the person I thought I married. We had 3 kids together, or at least that's what I'd been led to believe. The eldest, Haley, had graduated last year and was supposedly trekking across Southeast Asia. Ryan, the middle one, was heading into his final year at Stanford. And now Allison, the baby, was starting her freshman year at NYU. With my shower done, I hurried back downstairs, poured 2 cups of coffee, and returned to the bedroom. Kelly was still buried under the covers, her blonde hair a tangled mess on the pillow. "Morning, sleepyhead. Here's your coffee," I said, my voice carrying that artificially chipper tone I reserved for mornings like this. She groaned, sitting up with the sluggishness of someone who thought the world could wait for them. "What time is it?" "Almost 9. "Time to get moving," I replied, already fishing out 2 suitcases from the closet. "Why? We've got nothing planned today." She took a sip of her coffee, oblivious to the storm brewing 2 feet away. I unzipped the first suitcase and began tossing clothes into it. I'd rehearsed this moment for years, playing it out 1,000 different ways in my mind. It was almost comical how casual I felt now that it was finally happening. Kelly squinted at me. "What are you doing?" "What does it look like I'm doing?" I asked, deadpan, pulling a stack of shirts from the dresser. "Here's a hint. I'm taking my clothes out of the wardrobe and packing them into these suitcases." She blinked, the gears in her head slow to turn. "Packing? For what? Are you going somewhere?" "Yup," I said, folding a pair of jeans with precision. "Somewhere far, far away from you." Kelly stared at me like I just announced I was joining the circus. "What the hell are you talking about?" I paused, leaning against the dresser with a smirk that I couldn't suppress even if I wanted to. "Kelly, let me ask you something. What do I do for a living?" The question threw her. "What? You run a security company, right? Something to do with cameras and alarms?" "I don't know. You travel a lot, meet with clients. Why are you asking me this?" I nodded, biting back the laugh bubbling up inside me. "Close enough. But here's the part you've never cared to ask about. My company doesn't just handle cameras and alarms. We specialize in investigations. Background checks, fraud cases, corporate espionage, and my personal favorite, domestic investigations." Her face paled so fast it was like someone had yanked the blood supply from her veins. "What are you saying?" she whispered. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked over to the dresser, opened my laptop, and tapped the touchpad. The screen lit up with a still image, one I knew she'd recognize instantly. It was a picture of her, stark naked, on her knees. The man in the photo with her wasn't me. His anatomy, prominently displayed in the shot, left no room for doubt about what had been happening. Kelly's coffee cup slipped from her hand, spilling onto the comforter. She didn't even notice. "Goddamn it, Kelly," I said, feigning exasperation. "At least try not to ruin the bedding on your way out of my life." "What, how?" she stammered, her hands trembling as she pointed at the screen. "Where did you get that? Where do you think?" I asked, clicking a folder to reveal a cascade of similar images and videos. "Let's just say my team is very thorough." Her shock morphed into rage in record time. "You bastard. What were you doing spying on me? You've got no right." "No right?" I cut her off, my tone sharp enough to slice glass. "Kelly, I stopped having sex with you because I found out you were screwing half the trainers at your gym. Did you really think I'd risk catching God knows what from you? She opened her mouth to argue but closed it just as quickly. For once, she seemed at a loss for words. I pressed on. Oh, by the way, heard anything from Tony lately? You know, your little friend from the gym. Her silence was answer enough. Didn't think so, I said, grabbing my suitcase and slamming it shut. Last I heard, he checked himself into a clinic. Something about a positive HIV test. Kelly's face crumpled. If she wasn't sick before, she sure as hell looked it now. Kelly was pale, her jaw slack as she tried to process what I'd just told her. I could almost see the wheels in her brain grinding against each other, failing to click into place. You're lying, she finally muttered, her voice shaky. Tony doesn't have HIV. That's just impossible. Really? Because I've got medical records that say otherwise. Turns out, he's been carrying it for at least 2 years. So if I were you, I'd call up your doctor and book a blood test. You know, just to be safe. Kelly clutched the sheets like they were the only thing tethering her to reality. You're a bastard, she spat, tears welling up in her eyes. You knew all of this and didn't say anything? You let me. Let you what? I interrupted. Keep banging Tony and Greg like it was some kind of sweaty budget porno? Why would I stop you? You were so hellbent on destroying our marriage. I figured I'd let you finish the job. Her tears fell freely now, but they didn't stir an ounce of pity in me. I'd spent a lot of time swallowing my pride, hiding my disgust, pretending for the sake of our kids. Those tears were nothing compared to the gut-wrenching pain she'd put me through. You could have stopped me, she cried. If you'd said something, I would've stopped. I let out a bitter laugh. Kelly, you must have been cheating on me since the day we got married. Don't kid yourself. If I'd confronted you earlier, you'd have just run off with one of your boyfriends and left me holding the bag. The kids, the bills, the house, everything. No, I made the smart play. I waited a bit. I planned. And now? Now I get to walk away on my terms. You cold-hearted son of a bitch, she hissed, wiping her face with trembling hands. You mean to tell me you've been planning this the whole time? Just biding your time until what? Until the kids were gone. As it turned out, not our children, I said sharply. Let's get one thing straight, only Haley is mine. Ryan and Allison? Not so much. Her head snapped up. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb, Kelly. DNA is a beautiful thing. Ryan and Allison have 2 different fathers. Neither of them is me. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. That's not true, she whispered. You're lying. Oh, I'm lying? Let me guess. Are you going to tell me you never cheated? That Ryan and Allison are 100% mine. Go ahead, Kelly. Look me in the eye and say it. She couldn't. Her gaze darted around the room, landing on everything except me. That's what I thought, I said, pulling my second suitcase onto the bed. And just so we're clear, I didn't stop at paternity tests. I know exactly who their real fathers are. Hell, I've even sent them each a bill. Her breath hitched. What do you mean, a bill? You heard me. 21 years of feeding, clothing, and educating Ryan. 18 years of doing the same for Allison. And let's not forget the private schools and college tuition. That all adds up. I'm asking for $300,000 from each of them. Call it a reimbursement. Her face twisted into a mix of shock and horror. You can't do that. You can't just sue them. Watch me, I said, zipping the suitcase closed. I've already filed. Should be an interesting day for them when those papers hit their desks. You're going to ruin their lives, she shrieked, her voice cracking. You're going to destroy their families. Don't you have a conscience? I let out a dry laugh, leaning against the dresser. A conscience? That's rich, coming from you. Where was your conscience when you let me think those kids were mine? Or when you fucked their fathers behind my back? Face it, Kelly, you and your boyfriends made your bed. Now you get to lie in it. She started sobbing again, but I was done. All time of pent-up anger and betrayal had finally found their outlet, and there was no way in hell I was going to let her guilt-trip me into feeling bad about it. As if on cue, her phone started ringing. She shot me a panicked look before picking it up. I didn't bother pretending not to listen. And like a good actress, she played this conversation for an Oscar. Hello? Yes, it's me. What? He's doing what? Her voice climbed an octave, trembling with disbelief. How much? $300,000. No, he can't do that. That's insane. I didn't know he knew. She paused, listening intently, before snapping back. I don't care. You fix this. He's leaving me, Mark. What the hell am I supposed to do? Her face contorted with rage as she shouted into the phone. Fuck you too, you asshole. She slammed the phone down and buried her face in her hands. That was Mark Turner, wasn't it? I asked, savoring the moment. Let me guess, he's pissed about the lawsuit? She glared at me through her tears. You're suing him for $300,000. You're really doing this. Damn right I am, I said with a smirk. I spent over 2 decades raising his kid. He's lucky I'm not asking for interest. You're disgusting, she hissed. How could you ruin someone's life like this? I shrugged. Ask Mark. He ruined his own life the moment he decided to fuck my wife. Kelly sat shivering, her face wet with tears, her words coming out of her chest in ragged breaths. You turned everything upside down. The kids. You turned them against me. I raised an eyebrow, folding my arms. Oh, don't pin this one on me. You did that all by yourself. I just made sure they knew the truth. Speaking of which, you should know they've made their choices. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. I checked my phone, smirking as a notification popped up. Ah, perfect timing. That was Ryan. He just confirmed what I already told you. None of them want anything to do with you. You've officially alienated your children, Kelly. Congratulations. Her jaw dropped. That's a lie. Ryan would never. Allison's too young to understand. And Haley, she's halfway across the world. She wouldn't. She's not, I interrupted, watching the realization hit her like a brick wall. Haley's not in Thailand or Vietnam or wherever the hell you thought she was. She and Ryan at my new place. Funny how that works, huh? Turns out, they didn't want to spend their time with their lying, cheating mother. No. She shook her head violently, her hands gripping the bedspread. No, they wouldn't do that to me. Oh, they would, I said, grabbing my second suitcase. And they did. In fact, they were in the car parked behind us last night when we dropped Allison off. After we left, they filled her in on everything. Your affairs, the DNA tests, all of it. Kelly gasped, the color draining from her face. You told them all? How could you? How could you ruin their image of me like that? I snapped the suitcase shut and turned to face her. Kelly, you ruined their image of you. All I did was pull back the curtain. Allison had a choice, by the way. I gave her the option to stay with you. She chose to come with us. She clutched her chest as though I'd plunged a dagger into her heart. You can't take them away from me. They're my children. Not anymore, I said flatly. They're old enough to decide who they want in their lives, and clearly that's not you. You bastard, she screamed, her face twisting in rage. You've manipulated them. Brainwashed them. I'll stop you, I'll get a lawyer and… Don't bother, I cut her off, holding up a hand. Even if you could scrape together the cash for a decent attorney, you'd just be wasting their time. The kids don't want you, Kelly. And there's no court in the world that's going to force 3 adults to have a relationship with someone they despise. She glared at me, her fury boiling over into a desperate, venomous tirade. You've ruined my life. You've taken everything from me, my family, my reputation. Oh, I'm not done, I said, my voice icy. Your boyfriends? Mark Turner and James Carter? Yeah, I made sure that their wives received copies of all the evidence of infidelity that was available. Pretty sure that's going to cause some, let's call it, turbulence in their marriages. Her mouth fell open. You didn't. Try me, I said, a cruel smile tugging at my lips. And just so we're clear, I also made sure their workplaces know about their extracurricular activities. You'd be amazed how quickly companies react when their employees are caught screwing someone else's wife. Kelly let out a strangled scream, throwing a pillow at me. It missed, landing harmlessly on the floor. "You're a monster," she sobbed. "You've ruined everything." "Monster," I repeated, chuckling darkly. "No, Kelly. A monster would have burned this house down with you in it." "Me? I'm just giving you what you deserve." I grabbed my suitcases and headed for the door. She shouted something incoherent at my back, but I didn't bother looking over my shoulder. Whatever she had to say, it didn't matter anymore. As I reached the front door, my phone buzzed again. Another text from Haley. "We're all set. She can't touch the new place, right?" I typed back quickly, "Not a chance. Everything's locked down." Kelly might have thought she could claw her way back into my life, or worse, try to take what wasn't hers, but I'd made sure that wasn't an option. The house was still in my name for now, but the kids' inheritance, my company, and every other asset of value had been transferred to Haley weeks ago. She was sharp, sharper than I'd ever expected, and she knew how to keep it all safe. As I loaded my bags into the car, I took one last look at the house. It wasn't home anymore. In reality, it hadn't been for years. Kelly was standing in the doorway, screaming something unintelligible. I didn't care enough to figure out what it was. Sliding into the driver's seat, I started the engine, rolled down the window, and gave her a parting shot. "By the way, Kelly, when you call your lawyer, tell him not to bother coming after my company." I transferred ownership to Haley. "So really, you've got nothing left." Dream followed me down the driveway, fading into the background as I turned onto the street. It was over. Finally, mercifully, over. By the time I pulled into the driveway of my new house, Haley's house, I felt the tension in my chest start to ease. It was strange, almost surreal, how light I felt after finally cutting the dead weight of Kelly from my life. 24 years of lies and betrayal, gone in a single morning. The house was modest but modern, perched on a quiet cul-de-sac far from the chaos I just left behind. Inside, Haley and Ryan were sitting in the living room, laptops open, coffee mugs in hand. They both looked up as I walked in, their expressions a mix of relief and apprehension. "Is it done?" Haley asked, her voice steady. I nodded, setting my suitcases by the door. "It's done. She knows everything." Ryan let out a low whistle. "How'd she take it?" I smirked, sinking into an armchair. "About as well as you'd expect. Lots of screaming, some tears, and a desperate attempt to shift the blame onto me. But she knows the game's over." Haley leaned back, crossing her arms. "And the lawsuits?" "Turner and Carter." "Filed," I said, pulling out my phone to show them the confirmation emails. "Their lawyers should be getting the paperwork today." Ryan chuckled, shaking his head. "Man, they're going to lose their shit." "Good," I said, my voice cold. "Let them. They deserve every ounce of misery coming their way." There was a brief silence, the weight of everything that had happened settling over the room. Haley broke it with a quiet, "What about Allison?" "She's on her way," I said. "She texted me from the train. Should be here by dinner." Ryan nodded, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "Do you think she'll be okay? I mean, this is a lot for an 18-year-old to deal with." "She's stronger than you think," I said. "And she's got us. That's more than Kelly ever gave her." Haley snorted, her expression hardening. "Kelly's got no one now. Serves her right." I didn't say anything, but I couldn't help agreeing. Kelly had spent decades prioritizing herself, using people as pawns in her selfish little game. Now she was facing the consequences of her choices, and for once, I wasn't the one cleaning up the mess. Later that evening, Allison arrived, her face drawn but determined. She hugged me tightly, then Haley and Ryan, before sitting down at the kitchen table. "I still can't believe it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "All this time, I thought we were normal. Like a regular family." Ryan scoffed. "Yeah, well, regular families don't have moms who screw half the neighborhood." "Ryan," I said, shooting him a warning glance. He shrugged but stayed quiet. "It is hard," I admitted. "But the three of you don't have to deal with her lies anymore. You've got a clean slate now. All of us do." In the weeks that followed, the fallout from my actions rippled through every corner of Kelly's carefully constructed life. Turner and Carter both settled out of court, coughing up enough money to ensure that Ryan and Allison wouldn't have to worry about college loans, or anything else for that matter. Their marriages didn't survive the scandal, though that was hardly my problem. Kelly, meanwhile, vanished from the social circles she once dominated. The last I heard, she'd been arrested for soliciting, though I kept that tidbit to myself. The kids didn't need to know. It was enough that she was out of their lives. As for me, well, life had a funny way of surprising you. Samantha, my former secretary, had been a pillar of support throughout all of this. We'd reconnected after her own messy divorce, and what started as friendship had quietly blossomed into something more. "She's good for you, Dad," Haley had said when I told her about Samantha. "You deserve someone who actually cares." And I also felt like she was right. One crisp autumn morning, I stood on the porch of my new house, sipping coffee as the sun rose over the quiet street. The air was cool, the world peaceful. Inside, my kids were laughing, the sound filling the home with warmth. During this time, I lost a lot, but I gained something much more valuable: freedom. Life goes on, and sometimes it gets better.